Mike. Steven, how you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
Terrific.
A week down in Hilton Head with Liz and the family last week. Sounded good. It's good.
How you been? I've been fine.
parents did this for a while.
You're going to make a statement?
Maybe. I don't know. That's not part of my report.
Hello. Here you go. You're done.
I was Friday, Saturday I had 6 events.
Come on, that
Sunday I had 8.
Heidi.
That's not my busiest weekend.
who are we? Oh, Sarah's going to be late.
6 on Sunday.
I can do public comments.
You know,
I'm surprised. you
Okay, yeah, you might need to do that. You should prepare.
I've lost
have to. You've got to go to so many. Job's not conducive to keeping you right there.
So Bruce is here. This is, do we know, is Julie not coming? She didn't say anything. Okay, well, we'll proceed.
Did they come out of committee? It's Julie?
Is Julie at curriculum?
She had Sebastian, so she may need a minute.
She's here. She was here with me, so.
Okay. So should we wait for her, or?
We have a quorum. She will be here.
Okay. 7:06, I will call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start our meeting with Spotlight, and our secretary, Mr. Meek, will oversee that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we have 2 spotlights to recognize. The first one is Patrick Ruther. The Norwalk Board of Education is pleased to spotlight Norwalk High School senior Patrick Ruther for his commitment to his community and country. Patrick is an exceptional student who set high standards for himself and possesses the skills and strong work ethic to achieve them. Patrick is a member of the National Honor Society and a leader in Bears Beating Cancer. He is also captain of the boys varsity lacrosse team and plays the violin in the orchestra. He is also an active member of his church. This week, Patrick will receive the Norwalk High Citizenship and Service Award, created specifically for him. This award recognizes a student who aspires to serve his country and who has made a significant impact on his community. Last summer, Patrick began his training with the Connecticut Army National Guard. He earned the Distinguished Honor Graduate Award and received an Army Achievement Medal to recognize this accomplishment. According to Sergeant First Class Felix Gufra, Patrick leads by example with a quiet confidence and determination in all that he does. Next year, Patrick will attend the U.S. Military Academy Prep School, known as West Point Prep. West Point Prep is an extremely competitive program that prepares candidates for the academic, physical, and military challenges of the United States Military Academy at West Point. The Board of Education is pleased to honor Patrick for his persistence, commitment, hard work, and dedication. We wish you the best of luck at West Point Prep. Please come up, Patrick. The next item on our spotlight agenda are the Norwalk Public School students that are going to attend the National History Day Conference. Fostering a healthy spirit for competition inspires students to do their best while providing valuable skills that will serve them well throughout many aspects of their lives. Throughout the school year, NPS students participated in a variety of academic competitions, including Invention Convention, the National Geographic State Bee, NPS District STEM Expo, and National History Day. Participation in these events represents the district's commitment to providing rigorous learning opportunities. National History Day is a program for students in grades 6 through 12 that encourages exploration of local, state, and national and world history. After participating in a regional competition, selected NPS students went back in time at the State National History Day competition at CCSU in New Britain. They wowed judges with works ranging from a documentary on Vincent van Gogh's art and mental state to a website on the cancer cure that causes cancer and the mystery behind the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. Following the state competition, 3 Ponus Ridge Middle School students qualified to move on to National History Day competition in June at the University of Maryland. The Board of Education would like to recognize these students this evening. Additionally, we'd like to thank their dedicated teacher, Ms. Nealon, who has continued to support this group throughout the process. If I could have Ponus Ridge Middle students Sandra Andronic, Mia Schlager, and Camilla Chavez please come forward, and as well Jennifer Nealon.
Great job the first time around.
Thank you so much.
Nice work.
Congratulations. Thank you for inspiring them.
So in finishing, your hard work, perseverance, and genuine interest in learning about the past to create a better future has made our district proud. We wish you luck as you represent Norwalk Public Schools at the competition. Good luck. Thank you. And that concludes our spotlight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meek. We will start with public comments. Julie, could you get that sheet? Sorry, we're not as organized as we should be.
Beckley is first.
Okay, Brian, you want to start?
Jeff Beckley is first to speak. Jeff, please step up to the podium. You have 3 minutes to speak. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Jeff Beckley. I reside at 311 Mountain Road in Wilton, Connecticut. Good evening, Chairman Barbas, members of the board, Dr. Adamowski, and Mayor Rilling. My name is Dr. Jeff Beckley, and I'm a proud teacher of Kendall Elementary School, one of the current schools of distinction here in Norwalk. I am here this evening as a Norwalk Federation of Teachers building steward to share information that is relevant, important, and time-sensitive regarding the Above the Bar grant, as it is now called. Late last summer, Dr. Adamowski and this board began discussing the possibility of a grant to create the first ever School of Distinction in Connecticut with a majority of high-needs students. According to Dr. Adamowski, from a December 5th, 2018 article in Nancy on Norwalk, creating one School of Distinction with a majority of high-needs students had never been done in Connecticut, and that was one of the reasons why there's a philanthropic interest in this project. Kendall teachers began to voice concern to me after this publication. In an effort to give our school administrators a pulse on the feelings of the staff, a survey was conducted by myself and fellow NFT steward Heike Reichert. We had 34 full-time certified staff members participate, or around 97%, which is statistically significant. We shared those results with our administrators back in December 2018. You have those figures from the May 7th letter that I've already sent to you. But to quickly sum up the points again, 94% of the staff were opposed to restructuring the traditional model of the school calendar. 85% of the staff were opposed to adding 5 additional school days. 82% of the staff were opposed to increasing the day by another hour. 71% of the staff were opposed to adding 12 additional days of PD. It has now been reduced, I think, from that. And over 2/3 of the staff, about 68%, reported that they would request a transfer from Kendall Elementary School. As an NFT steward, I've had to consult crying teachers, counsel them, and rationalize to them feelings about how our school faculty and families seem to be unfairly targeted now as the only school in Norwalk that is facing a change to their calendar. What is even more confusing is that the original point of the grant was to create the first ever School of Distinction from a school that was as economically challenged as ours. We did that, as well as Tracy and Jefferson, without additional instructional time or without the grant. Actually, this was based on last year's data, which means it was 30 minutes fewer instructional time. Please don't misunderstand that our school couldn't use the money from a grant like this to be even better, because what school couldn't? If you want to give us help because we have the highest proportion of ELL learners in any school in Norwalk, about 33%, we certainly could use it. If you want to help us because we hover around 80% impoverished families, one of the highest, if not the highest in the district, we certainly could use that money. Yes, research does link poor performance on standardized tests to poverty. That should almost create the desire to enhance Kendall School, who perhaps had the highest growth in ELA in the state of Connecticut last year, with enriching experiences for our students. This could be meaningful summer and school break camps emphasizing arts, athletics, technology, and careers. But drastically changing the schedule of our school as an experiment, when clearly our performance shows that we can be a school of distinction without the grant and without the extra hours, seems to be an unfair consequence to the school with the third highest school accountability score in Norwalk. As of this evening, Kendall teachers have confirmed to me over the last 2 weeks that they have or are ready to notify HR of their intent to transfer.
3 minutes, Mr. Beckley. Next is Heike Reichert.
Heike Reichert,
Heike.
9
Three
Linden Heights,
minutes.
Norwalk, Connecticut.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Barbas, members of the board, Dr. Adamowski, and Mayor Rilling. My name is Heike Reichert, and I am a proud teacher of Kendall Elementary School, one of the current schools of distinction here in Norwalk. I am here this evening as a Norwalk Federation of Teachers building steward to share information that is relevant, important, and time-sensitive regarding the above the grant bar, as it is now called. I would like to continue the letter that Dr. Beckley started. As of this evening, 22 Kendall teachers have confirmed over the last 2 weeks that they have or are ready to notify HR of their intent to transfer. That is about 60% of our certified staff, almost the same amount as we had back in December. There are others still hoping that this isn't going to go through. It seems unlikely that Kendall can repeat as a school of distinction with so much turbulence in staff attempting to leave, being replaced, or perhaps being forced into staying with no alternative and limited buy-in to the model. That also doesn't seem to be fair to investors looking to allocate millions of dollars either. In a December 5th article from Nancy on Norwalk, Dr. Adamowski stated, quote, "This is not for everybody. Teachers can evaluate the proposal and go through an opt-in or opt-out process," end quote. End quote, "There would be no consequence for the teachers who decline to stay, as there will likely be vacancies in other schools," end quote. This was reaffirmed again in a May 5th article in The Hour, again by Dr. Adamowski, during a Kendall informational night. There aren't enough vacancies right now to cover the number of teachers looking to leave, and the list of retirees isn't large enough either. If this is the direction Norwalk Public Schools is going to force Kendall to adopt, as Dr. Adamowski has stated, quote, "It is not about adult involvement or adult convenience," end quote, then it's time to work with the NFT and certainly the teachers at Kendall to start finding a new school community for them, as well as teachers who may be excited for the opportunity to work this model. At the end of the day, we love our students. We love Kendall, but we love our families and our summers too. Please do not create a situation that will hurt us and our own families when we have worked and will continue to work so hard for the Norwalk Public Schools, as well as for the families of Norwalk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Janderko. Three minutes, Joe.
Joe Janderko, 9 Mott Avenue. Good evening, members of the board. I stand before you in support of my fellow teachers. During a recent meeting held at Kendall, parents and teachers voiced their concern about the communication and lack of transparency in year-round schooling. Many individuals felt that this change was going to occur no matter what feedback was given. Teachers at Kendall have expressed similar concerns about the extended school year model. There is a negotiated 2017 agreement regarding year-round schooling, but this model at Kendall does not adhere to this agreement. The NFT continues to be concerned about a school climate which does not meaningfully engage its parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, and other stakeholders in the development of a model. Kendall educators have already achieved great things, thus asking the questions if this experiment is even needed. A common theme throughout this district is failed communication with stakeholders. The examples are almost too numerous to mention, but include limited community involvement in the creation of the South Norwalk Community School, the middle school redesign, and redesign, the creation of the high school start time committee, and now year-long schooling. We don't understand why the district continues to disregard the importance of working with the Norwalk Federation of Teachers, instead working against us and working around us. I ask you, how would improved communication, increased teacher and student morale improve this district? Imagine a place where stakeholders felt part of the process rather than largely ignored. Imagine a school district where stakeholders felt programs were created together rather than done to them. The NFT is here to advocate on behalf of our members, but in doing so, we actively work to improve the lives of our students. We put the board's plan into action. We work tirelessly to fill in the missing pieces and smooth the rough patches created by your plans, which are often missing things and are not well thought out. Thank you.
Mary Yordan. 3 minutes, Mary.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Adamowski, Mayor Rilling, and members of the public. The Norwalk Federation of Teachers every day faces acts of violence committed by our students, severe disciplinary problems district-wide. We are all facing increased caseloads, increasingly needy students, reduced classroom staffing, although overall an increase in staffing. Through it all, we are committed to the students that we serve. We understand that our focus is our students. We are committed to the work we do. The NFT restates its desire to work with central office and the Board of Education. Most of the elements of the Kendall model have great value, but planning matters, and communication matters. The process matters. We ask for the consideration of a proper process, respect for our negotiated agreements, which are being disregarded. This is not a school community that is averse to change. They have implemented PSYOP instructional strategies, trauma-informed practices, PBIS, new curriculum in math, English language arts, science, and social and emotional learning. They have been putting a lot of innovation into place. We are here to ask for the consideration of all of these things, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Are there any other members of the public who would wish to speak? Seeing none, that ends tonight's public comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We will now move to the superintendent's report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we try to have some aspect of a data report on each of my reports. And we have the opportunity tonight to review the NWEA growth data from the past year. The NWEA is our cycle assessment. It serves several purposes, one of which is to provide teachers and data teams with feedback on how students are doing at earlier junctures of the year so that they can make adjustments in a student's program. But it also provides us with a very valuable measure at the end of the cycle, which our students just completed in April, as to how much growth they are making. Now, we all know that if a student can make a year's growth and not lose it over the summer, there would be no achievement gap. Our achievement gap is created by a lack of growth during the year and then a loss of growth during the summer. And these are the issues we're combating. Diane Florado is going to give you an overview of this year's growth measure. Before she does, I just want to clarify a statement that was made earlier that is not correct regarding Kendall's status as a school of distinction. Our state has this distinction award in several areas, including growth, including relative performance. Kendall's happens to be for growth. It made a 10-point gain in English language arts. You can get this for English language arts or math. It made a 10-point gain in English language arts last year. It essentially, by doing that, went from a 30th percentile school to a 40th percentile school. As was pointed out by several of the speakers, this is a school that has a tremendous amount of need, both in terms of income, the number of English language learners, the number of high-need students overall. Kendall historically, through the CMT days and the SBAC days currently, was Norwalk's lowest performing school. And so we applaud the growth and have recognized it, but I want you to know that there is still a lot of work here to be done. And I don't think it will be successful to continue business as usual without some radical change that can, for the first time, bring very low-income students, very high-need students, to the same standards as other students are meeting. And I would just ask everybody to consider that. I think we are beyond the days when you can just be against something. I think you have to have a plan. And if it's not this plan, it's some other plan. And, you know, our funders who came to us and indicated they would support this idea are very savvy about the research. And this is our best attempt, best thinking on how to utilize that research to change the equation for students that have not been able to experience the conditions in the past that would raise their achievement level to those of other students. However, tonight's report is about growth, and Diane will take you through this.
Good evening. We're going to be taking a look at the 2018-19 NWEA MAP results. We're going to begin with a review of key MAP terms. We're going to look at our math and reading trends. We completed our third full year of NWEA implementation. And then we're going to take a snapshot looking both at the impact of growth and achievement and where that places our students on a growth summary quadrant. One of the first major terms that we need to take a look at, a reminder of a ROSH unit. MAP results are reported on a continuous scale. This scale is unrelated to age, unrelated to grade of a student. It is a continuous scale over time, so that allows us to measure not only achievement, but growth over multiple years. The RIT score itself is an estimation of a student's instructional level. So teachers know where instruction should begin. The RIT does not measure mastery. When we think about Smarter Balance, a summative assessment, the end-of-year assessment, this is to pinpoint where our instruction should start. And that's done by the RIT scale or the ROSH unit results. Going hand in hand, I said that the RIT scale is unrelated to age and grade. But to put that RIT score in some perspective, there's a percentile associated with each RIT score. And as you can see, a percentile compares how well a student does in comparison to the students in the norming group. So if you have a student that's at the 50th percentile in math, that means that that student did as well or better than 50% of the students in the norming study. And you'll see the bell-shaped curve, which is typical. If we put students in the norming study from the lowest score to the highest score, it essentially would form this bell-shaped curve. You see about 68% of the students falls within the 40th and 60th percentile. Any students above the 60th percentile, about 16% are high-performing students. Students below the 40th percentile, another 16%, are the lower-performing students. Now, I'll give you an example of how the percentile puts the RIT score in context. We have two students. Both of them have a RIT score of 217. The first student is a grade 4 student. That means that student is in the 64th percentile of the norming study. That's all grade 4 students. So if you look at the bell-shaped curve, the student is about here in the high-performing area. We have another student, again, with a math RIT score of 217, but that student is in grade 8. So what does that mean? That puts the student here at the 24th percentile in the lower performing area. Same RIT score, same instructional level, but it means very different things. So that's how the RIT score and the percentile go hand in hand. Any questions? So now let's take a look. A performance measure in our strategic... Yes?
So that would mean we would have to differentiate with just about every student spread across schools, not even just grades. Do we do anything that approaches, in math, do we do anything that approaches that? For instance, take your example, the 8th grade student.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now is that, where will that, what level of instruction will that student receive who somehow made it to 8th grade?
That level of instruction will be based upon a learning continuum, which helps the teacher determine what the student is ready to learn next. Actually, the first step once a teacher gets classroom report is to see the distribution of students within those RIT bands to determine how to differentiate, how to form small group instructions in the classroom. So it's very applicable in that way.
So I think the best that can happen is there's a practical aspect of this, right? I think the best that can happen is that the teacher can use these RIT bands to group students. This is not, we cannot get to a level of individualization. At least we have not at this point. Unless you're in a personalized learning program like TTO or something of that nature, where every student moves at their own pace, this is grouping.
So looking at performance again in terms of norms or typical achievement, we see that one of our performance measures in the strategic operating plan is to increase the percent of Norwalk students who meet or exceed the NWEA achievement norm. So we see a 3-year trend in mathematics, 3-year trend in reading, and in comparison to 2018 end of year, we see we did have an increase in the percent of students that were at the 50th percentile or more in terms of achievement. And in reading, we also have an increase from 58.8 to 59.7 in the percent. And this is across grades 3 through 8. We should note that if you look at the average RIT score at each grade level, in reading, every average RIT score is above the 50th percentile. In math, in grades 5, 7, and 8, the average RIT score is above the 50th percentile. And that is certainly an improvement over the 17-18 school year. One thing you should note as you're looking at these results, and this is very important to keep things in context with our demographics. In 2017, 60% of the students in grades 3 through 8 were high-needs students. In 2018, it rose to almost 65%. Now in spring of 2019, 67.5%. So when you look at data, you look at results. We're not looking at a stagnant demographic. We're looking at a changing demographic. Yes?
Maybe at the retreat, could we break that down by the categories of high needs, whether it's ELL or SPED or,
I don't have that data available right now. I certainly could.
but in the summer?
We certainly can. I think you've had some of this reported in the past where our ELL population has grown. That is our largest high needs group now. We can give you an update on that, but essentially you're looking at a school district which over time has gotten poorer and has in which the number of high needs students has grown.
But wouldn't, by definition, Stephen, our largest group of high needs students wouldn't be English language learners, but would be income?
It could be one or more categories.
It's one or more. So again, you saw from our enrollment report, we're at about 50% low-income students as measured by the free lunch proxy.
Right.
Okay. This year, for the first time, our ELLs have become larger than special ed. Prior to this, special ed was our largest high needs group. So in that order, you're right. Low-income students as measured by free lunch, English language learners, and then students with special needs who are classified in special ed.
I find it perplexing because our median income has actually gone up in Norwalk over the last 5 years, so I'm confused. Are we having an experience where people are choosing not to attend our schools, and that's why the percentages are changing?
No, we do have data on that, and that's not the reason. The median income is due to people who don't have children in school. The median income of people the majority of people, the 80%, who do not have children in school, their median income has gone up. The median income of people who have, the 20% of people who have children in school, their median income has gone down.
I think it's really a function of the mix of who has children, right? So
Yes,
you
it's-
have a lot of young professionals that are too young, aren't married yet, so they don't have kids. We also have an older population that their kids have grown up. And really the people in their, whatever, 30s and 40s who have kids in the school system are, of a lower income, lower education probably, with a disproportionate amount of them being ELL themselves probably, but we probably don't have that data.
The next definition we're going to review is projected growth. That's a prediction of how much a student will grow over a specific period of time. And we have an example here. We have two students, A and B, who took the fall MAP test, and they're in grade 5, and in reading, they both started out with a RIT score of 207, which put them at the 53rd percentile. Student A grew 10 points over the projected, 5 points over the projected growth to 217, which put that student in the spring of 2019 at the 65th percentile. Student B, who is also projected to grow 5 points, only grew 1 point to a RIT score of 208. So then the student, in relation to their norming group, went from the 53rd percentile in the fall and dropped to the 41st percentile in the spring. So although there was an increase, a very small one in the RIT score, it certainly impacted their percentile. Now, if we have a third student, student C, again, who started at 207, and that student made projected growth, exactly 5 points. So that student moved from 207 in the fall to 212 in the spring. That child would remain at the 53rd percentile. So there is expected growth, but if you want students to really improve, you need accelerated growth. So now we're looking at students overall in grades 3 through 8, a trend line in both math and reading, and you see the percent of our students that met projected growth fall to spring for 3 full years of administration. Now, NWEA will tell you that typically national numbers are you can expect about 50% of students to make their projected growth. So every year we have exceeded that in both math and reading.
Is there a reason why the trend is downward, though?
It's such a slight change. I really can't identify a specific reason as to why. It's a different cohort of students. We have a whole new influx of grade 3 students. Yes.
Are these are aggregate, or are these?
These are aggregate across grades 3 through 8. You will be getting information, detailed information by school, but since we have a limited amount of time today, we are just looking at the aggregate.
I mean, to Dr. Kimmel's point, these could be statistical, margin of error type stuff.
Good. It's close enough for them.
Yeah.
Could be.
Okay.
But there is a trend, so we have to watch it.
Yeah. Agreed.
I think the important piece of information here is what Diane mentioned earlier, is that you want to score above 50%, because that is the national norm. So if you're not growing more than the national norm, you're never going to close the achievement gap. Right? We have to grow more than the national norm, which is 50% of students reaching their growth potential. It's kind of a sad thing when you think about it. Only 50% of students in the nation make a year's progress in a year.
Now we're going to look at these results a little differently. We're going to combine both achievement and growth. And here's a quadrant. The x-axis is achievement. If any students that are in this area are above the 50th percentile in achievement. And here we have, on the y-axis, we have the growth, the conditional growth. Any students in this area are above typical growth. So these quadrants are categorized, and this is pretty, I think you've seen this before. Students that have high growth and low achievement are learning. So if they keep up this pace where they continue to have high growth, what's going to happen in terms of their achievement? It's going to grow, and eventually those students will be moving over in the quadrant. Then we have a second group of students, the ideal situation. This is where we want all our students to be. High achievers who have high growth. This is where we want students to move from. Any students that we have here, we certainly want them to accelerate growth in order to increase their achievement. And those are students that have low achievement and low growth. And finally, there's a group of students, we call them lucky. They're high achieving students, but their growth is not in the high area, and it may be even lower than the 50th percentile. So they have the potential, they're there, but if they continue with that growth pattern, they're going to move back. They're going to move back into low achievement. So again, the 50th percentile for achievement is norm, typical. 50th percentile, conditional growth percentile, typical growth. But do we want our students to be typical in both of these areas? The answer is no. One of the benefits of having NWEA is their linking study. Their linking study to summative assessments. And we know that for students to be proficient on Smart or Balanced, they have to be around the 60th percentile in achievement. So we move the needle, and we're taking a look at actual results over 2 years. Now we're looking at achievement. We're saying high achievement is not at the 50th, not at the typical, but we're moving that needle over to the 60th percentile. Likewise, if we want to close the achievement gap, if you're having typical growth, remember the example with that student at the 207 who grew those 5 points to 212, it didn't change his percentile. So we're moving the needle to show growth at the 60th percentile or better. So what do our students look like that have this profile? We see the profile for 2 years in a row. We're looking at math, high achievement, high growth. For this school year, we had about 28%, and there's the count of students that fell into this category across the tested grades. 2017-18, it was somewhat higher, 30%. Now we have students who are high achievers, but they haven't grown at the rate we'd like to see. In 2017, they were about 11%. Now there's 14%. Our low achieving students, we had 36% low achieving, low growth. That dropped a bit to 35%. Our low achievement but high growth students have stayed about the same, 23%, 23.8. So we're going to look at the same quadrant for reading. High achievement, high growth. Some good news here. We moved up a bit. 31, we weren't quite there, and we moved up. If you look at the counts of students, that's a little encouraging. Our low achievement, high growth students stayed about 19.5%. Low achievement, low growth. We were almost at 33% last year. Now we're down to 30. And finally, our students' high achievement, low growth, we had 17%, about 720 students. Now we're up to 19%, 930 students. So, knowing the reality of these quadrants, even by school, may be a help to schools when they're developing their school improvement plans, their strategies, just to know the impact of both growth and achievement, I think gives you insight and value into this data. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you can see from this data the comprehensive nature of what an improving school system has to do, right? Let's take our gifted program, which was redesigned this year. These were the students who were in the high achievement, low growth quadrant based upon our data last year. Students who were low achievement, low growth, those are the students that have responded most to our Tier 2 interventions, summer school, additions of time in terms of learning. And so this is not something where you can just concentrate on one thing. We have to concentrate on multiple fronts because our students are in 4 different quadrants in terms of their learning needs. And that's the value of our NWA data. I think the most significant thing on this chart was that line on the axis moved from 50 to 60. So that's the good news. But it also points out to us that we need to be doing more in these respective areas. I'm going to move on. You have in front of you the SRBI handbook. And I just want to remind the board, refresh your memory, that in our priority implementation steps of the strategic operating plan that you set for 18-19, there is a priority step, number 9, that says implement a system of academic and behavior scientifically research-based interventions, SRBI. The state of Connecticut has mandated for a number of years that all Connecticut school districts follow an SRBI process at the district and school level. An assessment by CERC 2 years ago suggested that implementation was historically spotty at best in Norwalk, and the district role was missing. And it was around that data that we organized our SRBI work, and that led to setting this priority implementation step that I just read. So you had an update on this in the fall, but at that point, the handbook had not been accomplished, and we did not have implementation in all schools. We are at the point now of having completed this. The handbook is also, for parents, is on our website under the curriculum tab for parents. We feel that we have come the way we've needed to come in this important area. I want to just thank the members of the committee who served and did such great work in this effort. The SRBI committee was co-chaired by Stacy Helgenthaler, Pupil Services, and Janine Goss, our Director of Humanities. The members were Antonita Andropoulos from Silvermine School, James Martinez, the principal of Fox Run, Joseph Russo, formerly Assistant Director of Specialized Learning, Leah Zilich, who's a teacher at Fox Run and our Assistive Technology Specialist, Amanda Martinez, who, when this effort started, was a special ed teacher and is now our teacher in residence in specialized learning. Adam Reynolds, at that time Assistant Principal of Norwalk High School, Deborah Bell Johnson, Assistant Principal at Nathan Hale, Sandra Ellers, Site Director of Cranberry, Colleen Rumsey, a teacher at Merrimack School, Alexander Melly, teacher at Brian McMahon, Christine Robinson, teacher at Rowton, now teacher in residence in STEM, Abigail Maxwell, teacher at Rowayton, Helene Becker, our instructional specialist in ELL, Jamie Zyla, our school readiness coordinator, and Rose Jefferson, who is now our teacher in residence in humanities. I want to thank them for a great effort on this and all the time it took to implement this important process in our schools. This is going to require monitoring. It will require us relooking this on an annual basis, but this is a fundamental step for school districts as required by the state of Connecticut, and we're pleased that we are at that point. I have two other items. I want to confirm the dates for the board retreat. As you know, Maura has been calling you, trying to nail down who's available what days. So it looks like we have the same dates as last summer, July 25th, 26th, and 27th. The 25th would be an evening session, 5 to 8 p.m. July 26th would be a full day. That's the Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. And July 27th, the Saturday, would be 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The board will be at the Cranberry Park Bunkhouse, similar to last year, thanks to the city letting us use it. And on Saturday, when they have paying customers, we'll be going over to City Hall for the Saturday morning session. Very similar to last year. Based on Dr. Kimmel's suggestion earlier in the year, we will do a budget projection again at the retreat, and I believe we're going to be inviting at least some members of the City Council to join us for that and share a meal with members of the board, so they have a better understanding of your progress, budget goals relative to next year as well. Finally, last item on my report, and this was left off the agenda, unfortunately, I wanted to share with you a draft of the 2020-21 calendar. Now, you recall, we started a practice several years ago of developing and approving a calendar 2 years in advance. I'm giving this to you tonight simply so that you can study it. We can return to this in June. Some of it is very familiar, but I just want to highlight a couple of things that would be changes. So this calendar reflects one additional day of instruction for students and one additional professional development days for staff. It also extends parent-teacher conferences K-8, which are expanded to middle schools in December and March. And then the potential snow days are indicated in light green on June 10th and 11th. And we've never had less than 2. We have more than 2. We would go into the next week, the third week in June. Setting the calendar, whether it be for the district or a particular school, as was discussed at Kendall earlier, is a statutory responsibility of the Board of Education. As with previous calendar recommendations, I'll be sharing this proposal with the NFT officials and the district PTO council for their input, and I'll be able to report on some of that when you look at this again in June. While the calendar is the board domain, the NFT may wish to negotiate the impact of 2 additional days of work. The board will be negotiating a new teacher's contract beginning in June for the 2021 school year, coinciding with this calendar. I'm assuming that the negotiated wage increase and other compensation will encompass the 2 additional teacher workdays in this calendar. If that is not the case, we can make adjustments to the calendar in early fall. That is the beauty of setting the calendar 2 days in advance.
2 years.
2 years in advance. And again, this is simply for you to study. We did, the board last time, set this 5-day break in February. We were able to maintain that, but we're trying to make up for it, for the loss of that day before state testing with an additional day. I think you'll find some of the rest of this very, very similar.
Julie has a question.
Thank you. So I don't want to open up a can of worms, but my one question is, if we're thinking about 2021, assuming the Raise the Bar grant, whatever incarnation that may look like at 2021, would we have an idea of how that schedule would match against the broader district schedule, or at least for the vacations? I know there was discussion that the vacations would align, even though there would also be more. I'm just wondering about alignment.
Yeah, I think the folks that are working on this, Ms. Baker, I saw her come in earlier, Ralph Malanzizi, I think they're attempting to take the days that, the PD days that all teachers would have and have them aligned on the Kendall calendar. Obviously, the additional days would not be, they would simply be additional days. And I believe that the 2 major calendars, or 2 major breaks, the December break and the April break would also be aligned.
Okay, thank you.
And again, you know, this is something, we have a survey out now to parents and staff. We're going to be tweaking this. We don't have a proposal to share at this point. But when we do, you know, we're hoping that this will come as close as possible.
Thank you.
Barbara?
Yeah. Last year, when we discussed the calendar, members of the board asked for data regarding absences over a few years during that February period to see if there was a difference. I know I heard anecdotally a lot this year because we did it split over 2 weeks. People were pulling their kids out for the extra 3 days, or, you know, would there be any benefit in terms of attendance to having that be all in 1 week? And I know Wilton moved to the full week off, which means, you know, the more we align with the communities around us, the easier it is for the teachers who live in these other communities. So,
yeah, I mean, we have not approached it from that standpoint, convenience for adults who live in other communities. We're trying to get as many days as we possibly can before state testing, so our students have a greater advantage in their learning and our high stakes state assessment. So I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that our attendance for sickness this year was way down compared to last year. Last year was a very bad year for us in terms of the flu. This year was much better. So attendance is better, but you know, how it would play out in terms of the question you asked, I don't know.
I'd just like to analyze, so this year we chose to spread it over 2 weeks, the Thursday, Friday, Monday combo. And if we had all the days off in 1 week, would we get fewer absences for people pulling their kids out for vacation? So I'd just like to analyze the change.
What we can do is check that week, which we had this year, and we can check the absenteeism on, I think you're interested in absenteeism on the 8th, 9th, and 10th?
Correct.
Or whatever it was this year.
And then also those 2 weeks, really, to see what,
Okay.
over a couple of years, because we've played with it.
Well, we have 1 year of comparison. That would be this year. We can check and see if those 3 days before and 4 days after had higher or lower attendance than average daily attendance.
Thank you, I
I
appreciate
can
that.
certainly do that.
So we're dealing with, if I understand this right, we're not dealing, if I remember correctly, the last time we did discuss student attendance, I did not see a spike in February.
That's correct. The last time, when you
Right.
discussed it last year, there was not a spike.
So what we're talking about is a configuration where parents will not take, we're not dealing with the potential for illness, which can vary year to year when things hit, but we're dealing with when parents take their kids out of school, even though school is in session.
I think that's the intent of Ms. Mayor Mitchell's question.
Well, moving to 5 days was a health choice. More time for the air to clear in the school and for germs to die down. But then when we moved to 5 days, there was this anecdotal evidence that people were taking advantage of that to pull their kids.
So we did have an earlier flu season this year, or for the most part. And then it resurrected itself a little at the end of February, early March. But what I can provide you is the 3 days before and the 4 days after comparison of attendance versus average daily attendance.
Thank you.
And just one
Julie?
quick note too, I will acknowledge too that I think part of the issue this year also was that the April break was late, just because of how scheduling worked out, and so this April break is bumped up a little bit earlier, which hopefully should eliminate, or at least alleviate some of the familial concerns too around vacation.
Yeah, so you'll notice on this proposed calendar that we would begin the break on Good Friday and then have the Easter week after that, which provides everybody with a pretty long break in April. Now, that means we have to do NWEA testing before the break. And then the research tells us we need at least 3 weeks back in school before we take the high-stakes SBAC testing in May to avoid disadvantaging our students. So that is a major consideration, and that would promote what we're trying to do here, which is move the April break earlier.
Thank you.
Can I ask a couple of related questions? Diane, maybe you want to answer this too, that when is the last round of NWEA testing done, that year end? It was actually done pretty early, is it not?
It was done after 26 weeks this week. They have a norm for that. I think next year, it'll be a little longer. Will it not? I think either you or Dr. Myers could answer that, please.
Well, in the strategic decision that we had made was to administer NWA prior to Smarter Balance. And in doing that, our goal this year would be a 28-week window between VOY and EOY. And what we would also do is recommend that we did the VOY a little bit earlier in the second week of the school year so that we can quickly be able to get the data results and be able to use those in several of our data platforms. And then have 28 weeks of instruction before EOY, and then Smarter Balance would follow that, is the draft we have right now. We are still waiting for state Smarter Balance test dates. So we think we know the window, but that's what we need to finalize.
And is there any reason to try to, or request to try to push that even further back, the window for the SBAC testing, or is it just too hard? I mean, they just make their decision.
No, they will make their decision statewide, based on state considerations.
Okay. Because it does seem kind of like I guess if you're going to school, so the SBAC's in second, third week of May? So there's really no time to
Is that
do
reading, math, and,
end of year, there's really no time to do end of year NWA after that.
no. And the problem is, we make many decisions based on EOY, including summer enrollment. We want to be able to notify parents as soon as possible for those students who will qualify for summer academy.
Yep, okay. And then my second point, semi-related, is, I know this has come up a few times, I'm looking at the calendar, maybe it wouldn't work, but, why not have a break in March, instead of that first week of April? If we want as much advanced test time for kids to prep for NWEA, EOY, as well as SBAC, maybe, why should we consider having a break in March instead of April?
Well, that is the Midwestern calendar, which I was very familiar with at one time in my career. And I would certainly welcome that. I think it makes more sense educationally, because it puts much more time of instruction between the break and high-stakes testing. If I had any idea, now that would be the worst-case scenario for teachers who have children in suburban school systems, right? Because it would be totally off. But if I knew the board would consider something like that, I would be interested in presenting that in a heartbeat, because that would actually be the most sound way to handle the break. And again, if you look at school districts outside of New England, outside of Connecticut, the March break is a very common.
How do you want to say something? I would just say, private schools in our area do the March break, and you do end up getting a better, more consistent instructional time at the beginning of the year, January and February.
You do.
I know there is an argument about kids being sick and so forth at that time of year, but I know I sat on, before I was elected to the Board of Ed, I sat on a committee with, when Susan Marks was superintendent, where we restructured the whole school's calendar, and that was discussed in detail. I think that was the time when we cut February from being a full week down to a long weekend. So I don't know how we would proceed discussing this further. I don't know if the other board members, Heidi, I know you want to speak, but other board members, this is your chance to chime in.
I think, Mike, I think that's actually a good point, because looking at the calendar, when we start and then having that break, a little bit of a break during Thanksgiving in November, you obviously have over a week in December. January, a little bit of time, February, but if you also look and kind of swapping between March and April with testing, I think it's definitely something as a board we should absolutely consider looking at.
Well, if you would like me to give you an alternative calendar with a March break, I would enthusiastically embrace doing that.
Would it be
Please, Sarah, hold on. Sarah's had her hand up first.
I think there's a lot of intriguing things to consider about the idea, and also we might want to check and see if there are community partners that we can work with to do something about the childcare issues that might arise. Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean, with a switch to March? I mean, I think it's a problem regardless for a lot of
Right,
people.
An idea.
Barbara?
Are you proposing 2 weeks in March, or just moving so no break at all in April, moving it to the 1 week in March and still keeping something in February?
Well, you'd have Good Friday off. You might actually have a professional development day there, because that's a very good time for a PD day, but you would move a week-long break to March.
I think private schools, you're right, do have 2 weeks in March, but that's probably not in the cards for us. Julie?
I guess what's best for students is absolutely my concern and my priority. I do think having some discussions with some of our neighboring districts, if they would even be willing to consider this, at least to see if it's pretty early on, and that other districts may just be starting to think about this too, and the acknowledgement that if we have lots of teachers that are then out, then we're getting subs in classrooms, so we may be negating the impact if they're not getting the actual instruction that they should be getting, if their teachers are not actually in the classroom. So I think what's best for students is absolutely the concern, acknowledging that we do have many teachers that live in other districts that may be going on vacation. So really having a full understanding of the benefits and consequences of.
I think this is going to raise the need for data that I don't think we've really collected, and that is the composition of our teaching force, right? We've hired a lot of new teachers in the last several years who do not have families yet. We have baby boomers like myself who are aging, whose children are grown. That may be as large as a third of our workforce now. We don't have good data on those teachers who do have children in other school districts. And I think this may motivate us to obtain that, and it may surprise you. It may not be as large a number as we're assuming.
One thing I will say from negotiating the NFT contract, I do remember we do have a component of teachers who live outside of the district who bring their kids to Norwalk, and those teachers used to actually have preferential rights over teachers who lived in Norwalk where their kids could go to school, which we rectified that in, I don't know if it was the previous one or 2 contracts back. So there definitely is a component of our non-resident teachers who bring their kids here. But at the same time, we do have, I don't know what the percentage, but I would say we definitely have a number of our teachers living in Trumbull and Monroe. And the only reason I know that is from issues we had with snow days in the past. I don't think we probably have a lot of teachers, if any, living in Darien or New Canaan with their kids going to school there. Some, but probably a pretty small number. And as Stephen said, you look at the demographics, we have a lot of older seasoned teachers whose children are probably adults, and then a number of younger teachers who don't have children school age at this point. Anyway, I think, Stephen, if you would, whatever data you can access, and if Mary has access to any data to kind of give us some insight there. I think it's a little difficult to talk to some of our neighboring districts because you don't have a superintendent in Westport, you have a new superintendent coming in Darien. I mean, there's a lot of turmoil in some of our neighboring districts, but maybe give the board 2 proposals. We can all do some homework in the next month, talking to different stakeholders to see what they think. And I know from having worked on this calendar 9 years ago, you're not going to make everybody happy, and there are a lot of different opinions, but at least let's do some research and see if we can come up with a better option.
Okay, so I'm going to do 2 things. One is work with our staff to prepare an alternative calendar with a March break, and then I believe our talent office should be able to get data on teachers who have children enrolled in other school districts. If we don't have that, we'll figure out a way to get that.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, so now we will move to the consent calendar. We have approval of personnel, approval of budget transfers, approval of trips. Could I have a motion?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Okay, can I have a second? Sarah Lemieux, a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Julie. Unanimous? Okay, so I would note, one of the trips we're approving is a trip that's actually leaving next week. We're sending, I think, 4 teams of students to the National Invention Convention Entrepreneurial Expo in Detroit, Michigan. So congrats to those guys. I think one of the students is in 1st grade. So it's a pretty remarkable team, I think, that's going to represent us, and good luck to all of you. Are you going, Lori? I'm not. You're not, okay. Well, report back once we hear. Okay, so then our next approval is something near and dear to my heart, and this is the approval of the principal for Owayton Elementary School. I think we have a couple speakers that want to comment on this. So maybe we'll hear from them before we actually vote. I would mention that I have a lot of history with Rob Pennington, who's been chosen by the School Governance Council to be the principal for Owayton School. This was our first school of distinction. Rob was in our first relay group. Second? Okay. Rob actually taught my son a number of years ago, and Rob is really famous for a lot of things. You should try to follow him on Twitter. You'll need a dictionary because you won't understand most of what he's talking about. But he is really at the forefront of using technology in education, and we are very, very lucky to have him on our team. I also, one of the just a perfect example of Rob's creativity, ingenuity. If you've ever seen these stories in the Newark Hour of these kids that go on a treasure hunt, history treasure hunt, I believe Rob started that. It's been continued by his colleagues at Rhoden Middle School. But I learned a lot. It was fascinating, and I'm glad the press gives it good coverage. So please continue to do so, Justin. And then we just might add, also, we're very lucky because his wife, Megan, who's also here in the audience, is our nurse at Tracy School. So this is really a true NPS family. But why don't we have the president of the SGC, if you want to get up, Megan?
Do you need to come down there?
Yeah, you might as well. We also have Annie Allen, who was head of the search committee from the SGC.
Hi, everyone. Megan Douglas Warren. I am co-chair of the SGC at Rowayton Elementary School. And Annie.
I'm Annie Allen. I'm a member of the Governance Council at Rowayton Elementary School.
We are very pleased to have chosen by unanimous decision Rob Pennington as our next principal for our school. I think we're both probably pretty emotional about it. He has really, hand in hand with Joe, turned our school into such a top-performing school, and we are really, really grateful for his time. And I feel like I do need to shout out to his wife to thank her for sharing him with us, because he's available to us 7 days a week, and it's just been amazing, his progress that he's made and the implementation that he's done with everything that he holds near and dear to his heart. So we are very grateful. Thank you. Do you want to share anything?
I'll just, jump on what Meg said and say, this was unanimous decision. And I think throughout this entire process, all of us on the Governance Council were being grabbed at different points, and people saying, is it going to be Rob? Is it going to be Rob? Is it going to be Rob? And everyone in the school community is thrilled. These two have changed the energy of our school. It is a place where kids are excited every single day to come in. It's warm and it's friendly as well as high performing. So anyway, congratulations, Rob. We're thrilled.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your hard work. We know what being a volunteer is like, and we appreciate you shepherding this process. Joe, did you want any words of you'd like to share with us?
Sure.
Joe, for people who don't know him, was Principal Brian McMahon for many years, and then worked in our talent office, and then went to become the interim principal at Rowayton School, supposedly for a year, and thanks to the persuasive qualities that our superintendent has, we got him there for 2 years.
He didn't have to persuade me.
Anyway, the floor is yours.
It's been an absolute joy. I cannot. It's going to be very sad for me to leave that school, but I cannot be happier to know that I do know that Rob is going to be principal of that school beginning July 1. Rob and I have formed a partnership that has made life easier for me. I hope I've made his life easier as well. Both of us really love that school. We love that entire community. And Rob quickly became a part of that community. And that's one of the things that truly distinguish Rowayton School from many other schools that I've known. I've been, this is my 12th year as a principal, and I've really loved schools where I've worked. I have never before had an experience like the past 2 years. It's been awesome. Rob is going to take that school to bigger and better places yet. He's going to do a phenomenal job. He will give you all he has. He will be there all the time, and he will do it with heart. So you have great choice, Rob Pennington.
Thank you. If I could have a motion to approve. Julie Corbett first, seconded by Heidi Keys. All in favor? Rob, you're now approved. If you'd like to get out.
Frank Costanzo had an emergency with his son tonight being rushed to the hospital, so he was not able to be here to introduce Rob. So Rob, I'm introducing you, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Chairman Barbas, members of the board, Dr. Adamowski, I'm truly honored to be able to continue the vision of excellence and community at Roehampton School. I also would not be here today if there wasn't so many people that saw leadership potential in me. Dr. Costanzo selected me for the New Leaders Program and the Relay Principal Fellowship Program, two amazing cohort that's part of our leadership pipeline here in Norwalk. I've been able to go through both of those programs. Principal Feos, when I worked at Brookside as a curriculum and instruction site director, and most recently working with Joe Rodriguez. It really he has pushed me, he has challenged me, but he has made me a better leader every single day to be able to continue to build Roehampton School. It really is an amazing, special school, and the word that I think everyone at Roehampton uses is community. That's what makes the school special. The students and the parents. In many schools, parents come up with ideas. At Roehampton, parents come up with ideas, and then how are we going to implement, and they're there. And so I'm very honored. I'm very excited to be able to continue that vision and to grow. I know that we are going to do some amazing things at Roehampton School. Thank you very much.
Finally, if I could, I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank Joe Rodriguez for his service over the past 2 years. This started as a short-term venture, became a one-year venture, it became a 2-year venture, and Joe, you have really, you've been perfect for the school, and you have restored it, I guess, is the best way to describe this, to its full potential. And you've launched it and gotten it on its way and been able to develop and transition to Rob. When we look at developing talent in our school system, when we look at transitions, it doesn't get any better than this. This was almost the perfect scenario that we wish we could implement in almost every situation. That would not have been possible without your steady hand, your experience, and your way of dealing with teachers, parents, and children. And we thank you for your service.
Thank you. That's the fun part of this job. There aren't many parts that are. The next thing is I would like us to approve our fiscal year 1920 full-service inter-school agreement with Side by Side Charter School. This, I believe, is required by state law. So could I have a motion?
So moved.
Brian Meek, seconded by Samara Mitchell. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Then, I don't know, we're going to approve the summer school policy 5123.11. Ms. Keys, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know we actually had this up for discussion during our last meeting. We're just continuing our CABE mandated policies that we need to make sure that we get done. We've done quite a bit. There's still more on the list, so we're continuing to work on that. As I was looking back, I think we had a meeting back in February, if I'm not mistaken, with curriculum and instruction going through summer school. So this has been a long process, but I think we just need to move forward on this and continue the rigor for our students and continue to add the grades that we have over time. So that's policy 5123.11, and we've also worked not only with curriculum and instruction with the policy committee, but also Dr. Myers as well. She's been instrumental in kind of working certain pieces to get this policy moved on. In addition to that, we have personnel policies or records policies, 4112.6, the evaluation policy, 4115, staff development policy, 4131. If I can also interject, a lot of these policies were implemented back in 1985. Then they were looked at, revised back in 1998, and then looked at again in 2003. So we're talking almost 16 years since we've been able to kind of delve in and take a look at these. So it's a long time coming to get these policies, and I think that was the main reason why we had the CABE audit. There were so many policies that or out of date, they weren't compliant, that we needed to take a look at and continue working on. So these are the policies right now that we've already discussed again during our last meeting, that we're bringing back again for approval. I'm hoping we could approve these and move forward.
Okay, well, that's great. Any further discussion? Mr. Kimmel, Dr. Kimmel?
Yeah, from what I remember, I like the way the policy committee addressed the summer school policy, because it provides the board the flexibility it needs, because this is something that can vary year to year to year depending on budgetary constraints. So the policy is written so we don't have to jump through hoops every time we change it, which I think is a smart way to do it.
Okay, well, that's great. And could we have a motion? Julie Corbett, seconded. Heidi Keys, all in favor? Okay, unanimously approved. Now we're going to have approval of personnel policies. There are 3 different ones. Personnel records policy 4112.6, evaluation policy 4115, and staff development policy 4131. Ms. Keys, would you like to discuss this?
Yes, I mean, that's similar, that we've had all these, the rest of these policies, so I think, especially if I could just talk a little bit about staff development, we really wanted to make sure that we were fair to our staff development, and also in addition to that, having the rigor involved for our staff development for our teachers. I mean, it's imperative that we continue to do that, and I think that's continuously part of our policy as well.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? All in favor? Did I have a motion? No, I don't.
Did we do a motion?
Did have a motion. Julie Corbett, seconded by Sarah Lemieux. Thank you. Okay, now we will go through, there are 3 sets of ed specs. I intentionally did not have them printed out in paper because it would have been half of a forest. But this was the ed specs for the Global Academy, which is the International Baccalaureate Early Years K-5 program in the old Columbus property. And it's not specifying whether it's a new building or renovation of that building. Ed specs for Norwalk High School. This is work we're doing that qualifies for state reimbursement. Some of the work we're doing doesn't, but this work does. And then last of all is the renovation is new at Jefferson School, which we've, I think, had presentations on. So I don't know if there are any questions about any of these 3, but these are the EDO 49s that need to be submitted to the state by June 30th in order for us to get in the queue. You can only apply once a year, and so timing here is paramount. If we miss this deadline, we have to wait a whole nother year. And if you recall, everything is kind of like a domino effect as to we're already working on Columbus now, or Ponus Ridge, the K-5 school. Once that's done, the Jefferson kids will move there, and then we've got a year to renovate that building. The Columbus kids will go to their new school at Columbus at Ely. We can renovate the building or build a new building on Concord Street, and then it will be ready for the early years program to start. And for Norwalk High School, we're doing some work this summer. We'll do more work next summer. So that's what those 3 projects are for. I guess we have to vote for them each indivially. I mean, did you want to say something, or you want to?
No, just say Tom's
Tom,
here.
I saw Tom walked in. If anyone has any other, there are more questions, but I think it's the Global Academy. That, because it's a new school, Suzanne Korschatz is overseeing the IB work for that. Obviously, Newark High School was the SGC, as well as Principal Reg Roberts. And Jefferson, that was the current principal, Nick Brophy, and his team. So, Tom, is there anything further I haven't said?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions in terms of follow-up items from last night's Facilities Committee. We did have a communication from Yvette Gorovich, and Jim Giuliano was going to amend the ed specs with respect to the special education room in terms of making sure that there was some verbiage in there to provide for a support beam for the swing that was talked about at the Facilities Committee last night.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Julie.
Just have one note on the Norwalk High School one, so I guess that's page Roman numeral 6, Bullet point number 4, just before this goes to the state, bullet point number 4 under main entrance upgrades is an incomplete sentence. So just before it goes to the state.
Tom, you got that?
I'm sorry, I didn't have it in front of me. This is on the main entrance?
Main entrance upgrades, bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4. The removal of existing plantings that provide concealment and pose a climbing threat, which are counter to.
Okay, obviously we're missing something there. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, Bruce, sorry, didn't look over that one.
2 points. One, a few people have asked me a question I find difficult to answer, and the difference between, we've built from scratch, and there's so few schools. The question in a lot of people's minds, it's not been clear, and I'm not blaming anybody, it's just a complicated issue. What is the difference between renovation as new versus new? I've known a lot of people, they say, well, if you're going to renovate it as new, well, what's the big deal? It's going to be new, but it's not going to be new. I think that's a fuzzy area that needs a little bit of clarification going forward, because it would probably have some implications on the cost differences going forward, the difference between new and renovation as new over the next 20 years or so. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing...
Well, can I address that, Bruce? Just
I'll let you address both of them. The second thing is this, kind of a first for me, is the idea that are we actually going to the state without an official designation of what we're going to do? Renovation is new versus...
This is due by June 30th.
Right.
The Planning Commission is voting tonight, and the Common Council will vote next Tuesday, the 28th.
The ed specs are how you have to design the school, what features it has to support the program. So that should be able to be done in a renovation as new versus a new building, both. It's the same ed specs.
You're not making a distinction,
So
but...
there is no difference in the ed specs?
No difference in the ed spec. The ed specs basically say,
problem.
here's the program, here's what we have to have in the school to support the program.
But going back to your first point, so you are correct in the sense that the term renovation is new is a misnomer, because it obviously is not a new building, one. Two, you're working with the parameters that you have, so what we've been told is, you can't do the same amount of insulation. You can't insulate the old building like you could a new building. The same thing with the ductwork. You're going to have to work with existing structures, so the ductwork will not be as efficient as it would be in a new building. You'll still have the issues with circulation. You'll still have the issues with safety. You're also going to have a building that's, instead of being 50,000 square feet, which is what the state wants for that school population size, that's over 60,000 feet. So you're going to have to maintain climate control, light, everything else, those extra 10,000 square feet, which we estimate could be $50,000 to $100,000 more a year to run.
Well, that's the issue, to figuring out precisely, whatever it is, $35,000, $50,000, $75,000 a year, multiply 10, 20, or even 30 years, that's a rather large sum of money. And as Mr. Meek has said in the past, we don't want to put a really, really nice Band-Aid that makes everything look nice and everything on a school, but then in 5 years and 10 years and 12 years find ourselves in these situations that we found ourselves in over and over and over again, where we renovated a school even as new, but then had to come back and do work on it in future years. So when it is discussed further by other city agencies, I understand the difference in the cost today is one thing. The difference in the cost over the next decade or two could be quite another thing, and you're going to have to think a little bit differently approaching this. And I certainly hope it's looked at carefully.
Right.
Yeah, I hadn't made this point to the council. I did address the council as a personal, private citizen, not to myself as a board, but, the debt service on this new school versus this renovated school, it's like $75,000 a year. We haven't carried this into this, but some of the estimates, I know they're estimates, but talking about saving like $50,000 a year in maintenance and energy costs. And, we're not allowed to factor that into the calculus, but I think you really have to think about that. Like, just a more efficient building, greener, cleaner, leaner, meaner.
Yep, I agree. Anyone else? I mean, at this point, we voted and we recommended to to build a new building, but it's out of our hands now. So the planning commission, did they vote while you were there, Tom, or they?
They spent the last hour and a half debating it, vigorous debate, and they just took a 10-minute break when Kristen texted me to come upstairs. So I assume they're voting right now, but I don't know how that vote's going.
Yeah, no, one of the planning commissioners just sent me a message and said it has been quite contentious. And I will note that Tom and I were contacted by Mike Rinn, who I think is the P&Z staffer assigned to the planning commission, that, representing this superintendent had made a statement that the educational, the program wouldn't be impacted one way or the other, which it turns out, I confirmed this with the superintendent, was a comment he made taken out of context, and that in fact that is not what he felt. So we sent, I forwarded the corrected statement from the superintendent, which I said to you too, Tom. Hopefully that was discussed at the.
Yeah, that was discussed, and in fact the statement, there were copies of it made for the members of the planning commission as well. So they did have that statement with them.
Okay.
So just to clarify, what I said is what I said to you earlier. The ED, the ed specs are the same, and we can support the program with the same ed specs in a renovation as new versus a new building. But, and this was kind of left off of the Historical Commission's letter, I also said that the operating costs would be much more expensive. We could not insulate well, could not move structural walls, could not change window spaces, could not do all the things you do when you can design a building from scratch and save on those operating costs over the long term. And we're taking a killing on operating costs now. We have schools with single pane glass. We've got Jefferson that's electric. One of the objectives of this whole effort should be to bring down operating costs so that we have more resources to spend on instruction.
Brian?
Well, yeah, also, I mean, the intangible too of a safer drop-off design, right? Like it's not necessarily the safest layout
The circulation
right
doesn't
now.
work.
Right, so, I mean, a new building gives us a safer environment for the children.
That's correct. Okay, so if we could have a motion to approve the ed specs for the Global Academy, could I have a motion? Eddie Key, seconded by Dr. Kimmel, all in favor? So unanimously in favor of the ed specs for Global Academy. Now to approve the ed specs for Norwalk High School. Julie Corbett, seconded by Heidi Keys, all in favor? Unanimous. And last of all, the ed specs for Jefferson Elementary School, renovation is new. Do you have a motion? Dr. Kimmel, seconded, Sarah Lemieux. Oh, Sarah Lemieux, okay, seconded by Julie Corbett. All in favor? Thank you, unanimously approved. Last of all, to approve the drawing, specs, and cost estimate for 08 asbestos abatement project. We've discussed this before. Could I have a motion? Ms. Keys, seconded by Mr. Lyons. All in favor? Unanimously approved. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do you know when we're expecting that 5-year assessment of asbestos across the district?
I think Bill Hodel is working on that. I think it's required by the state, but was last done in 2000. I forget now exactly. It's been a few years.
The district-wide assessment of asbestos in all the schools?
Right, I think that's done every 5 years.
Yeah, I think if that is.
The next one is 2 or 3 years from now, I believe.
I thought we had learned in a facilities meeting that it was.
But Tom, you have one that's only a couple of years old.
Yeah, we have.
That could be shared.
Okay.
Okay, we will now go to information reports. Ms. Keys, I don't know if you want to take this on. First read of community relations and personnel policies.
Yeah, I'll take it on. It's a little hard, and I have to apologize. The copies that we have, really difficult to read. So I'm going to just go through some of the highlighted areas, and I've actually been highlighting it so I can actually read part of it. These are some of the suggestions from CABE. And the highlighted area, the part that's hard to read, is what they're recommending and everything else to stay in place. If you see a slash through it, obviously that means to take it out. So if I could just briefly go through this, and again, this is just our first read. It'll be brought back to the board again during our next business meeting. Community relations, school directories, underneath that, student personnel directory, and it's policy 1111.1A. The No Child Left Behind Act 2001 / they've recommended, obviously that's out, and then just putting in Every Student Succeeds Act. If you turn over to the following page, policy 1250A, community relations visits to schools. Such visits shall be regarded as expressions of interest in school affairs and/or efforts to become informed in school programs and activities. If you move down to number 6, ensure student safety. Visits to individual classrooms during instructional time should be permitted only with principals' and teachers' approval. Such visits shall not be permitted in the duration or frequency interferes with the delivery of instruction or disrupts the normal school environment. When a visit involves conference with a teacher or the principal, an appointment should be scheduled during non-instructional time. Since continuity in classrooms is often difficult to achieve and maintain while visiting in a classroom, a visitor must not interrupt the class in any way, not speak, or unless invited to do so, or disturb the student or teacher. Do you have a comment?
I did.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to
Not okay.
disseminate that at our policy committee meeting, we had talked with Dr. Costanzo, who's not here,
Yeah.
about how the language suggested in the policy doesn't necessarily incorporate a parent volunteer role. And
Yes.
that CAPE suggests a separate policy to deal with parent involvement in the schools as opposed to just a community visitor who's not a parent. So to let that be known to everybody.
Yes.
Is this what you just, the section ensure student safety, these two areas you just read?
Yes.
These are new additions?
Yes.
We had nothing?
I don't, anything, that wasn't, if it was slashed out, that means we crossed it out, but we didn't have any of this. So these are policies, again, that CABE recommended, because we haven't looked at this for so long. So this is added language that they recommended that we use. And that's why we're putting that in here. If we turn to the following page, community relations, still continuing policy 1330A, use of school facilities in the buildings. If you move down in the first paragraph, I'll just add on where it says programs carried on by the Recreation Commission, they may be rented by any lawful organization, and the part that was added in was for activities of an educational, cultural, civic, other non-commercial use consistent with public interest. Again, I apologize. Is anybody else having difficulty reading this? Or is it me? Okay, it's a little hard to read. If you move down, I'm sorry? Underneath 2, the Boy Scouts of America, Big Sisters of America, Boys and Girls Club of America, Future Farmers of America, Girl Scouts of America, Little League Baseball, Inc., and other groups intended to serve youth under the age of 21, listed in Title 36 of the U.S. Code, may use school property upon payment of suitable fees, cost according to the board-approved fee schedule. Continuing on, if we look, policy page 1412, and I will add any of our, these are smaller policies, but any of our larger policies, Julie and I also discussed this many times, we're really trying to put page numbers in because it's hard to read when we have really long, intensive policies, but some of our shorter ones were not, but we are working on really adding in all of those page numbers, so we refer back to this. But looking at community relations, the fire department, we added in where it says members of the fire department, we added the portion of and the city fire marshal may play a vital role in the school safety, and we added in the portion of security. Moving on, it shall be the responsible of the superintendent, we added an of superintendent of schools. Number 1, in addition, we crossed off local, we crossed off department and added in fire marshal and fire department. Number 2, work with his or her, we just put in the, it was recommended putting in the versus his or her. 3, just adding in and. Number 4 involved the department in crisis response drills and other related activities designated to the practice and test effectiveness of school response plans. In addition, if you move on where it says "and fire marshal," that was added. There is a typo. It says "in," we should just remove that. There should be a line for that, and we crossed off at least the following matters. Number 1, and crisis of response drills. I will add into this policy, we know obviously school safety, so this is imperative that we have this up to date, and we have this language in here, especially the language that they recommended for us. Last page, the affirmative action plan. If you look under number 1, marital status, added in sexual and then orientation versus preference. Gender identity or expression was added in as well. And that is it, unless any of our other policy members would like to add in. Mr. Meek?
Oh,
Or
I'm not a
any-
policy member, I just have a question.
Yeah, go, before I jump in for you, Brian, is there anybody else on policy that wants to add? Sarah, Julie, Mike? Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, Heidi, thank you, this is awesome work. I know our policies are
We're getting
myriad
there.
and
Right.
some outdated and some better than others. A question about 1330, community relations. I thought there was some kind of consensus amongst the board members that the board should be notified in the event that some event's happening
Right.
with a public official or something like that. Did
We did-
we left this out, or?
Well, we didn't put that in here. This wasn't, this language, and we discussed it as a policy committee, was suggested by Kate, but I understand your point because we have discussed that before. You're talking about other members coming in without board members knowing?
Yeah, like if public officials need to use our facilities or have an event with the news and the
Right.
media, and not necessarily that we need to go,
No,
but
no, no,
at
but
least
we're
we
aware.
know what's
Right.
going on.
I think it's been in discussion, hasn't been put into policy, but I think it's something that we can look at.
That would fall under
It would fall under that.
1330?
Yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
good news about any of these policies, we can tweak, add, we can continue to add, like any of our other policies, if we need to, so we can certainly take a look at that again.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Although the 1330 is more about use of the school facilities, so if a public official is coming as part of an education-related piece, that might not necessarily fall under 1330. If they're holding a separate event at one of our schools, that would fall under 1330.
So I don't know where it belongs, to be honest with you. I just know that oftentimes, we're like, find out like a day or two later, oh, hey, did you know the mayor was up at the school? And like, oh, I didn't know. Well, that's great.
Or the governor or
I'm
the
sure-
U.S.
Right,
senator, we
anyone.
never even heard about it.
I think we,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
we
it's
talked
just, you
about
feel
that.
kind of like,
Why didn't we know?
yeah, it just seems like it would be our domain to know that, even if we weren't going, or, just, we could reach out to that public official, hey, do you need anything? Let me know how I can help, et cetera.
Is that policy or is that procedure?
I don't know.
Well, we've been following a practice of notifying you
Yeah.
whenever we have a public official or appointed official visiting the school or utilizing the school for some purpose. The governor's visit was a good example of that. Congressman Himes having his town hall meeting, these kinds of things. Because the assumption is that you may want to attend that, or should at least know that it's occurring. So Brenda has been doing her level best to inform you of those things and invite you to them. This is all dependent on us getting this information from the principal. And we've had several discussions with our principals, asking them, urging them, requiring them to notify Brenda when that's going to occur so that you can be aware of it as well.
Can I just interject? I think Brenda has been fantastic getting that information. We've gotten much better with that, but sometimes we'll notice things, it could be on any parent or a Facebook page or Nancy, we'll notice some events and not know, and I know recently there was something, I think it was just a play, it wasn't at any of our high schools, it might have been at Ponus, I can't remember which school it was at, but I didn't realize it until I saw something in the paper or something on Facebook, and I thought, well, we might not all be able to go, but oh my gosh, it passed and I never even knew, maybe I would have wanted to go. So I know Brenda has really been working with our principals, just even if there's 1 out of 9 of us, one representation from the board going, I think is important, and then we can decide amongst ourselves. I think we discussed that as a group, that all 9 might not be able to go, but maybe 1 or 2 might be able to go. So I think it's just getting that word out.
To Dr. Adamowski's point, we do have it as almost an administrative procedure, and we have been reinforcing it with the principals literally at the beginning of every year at the administrators meeting, and then throughout the course of the year as well. There are things that still might slip through that perhaps the principal does not notify myself or Dr. Costanzo, and we do find out about it a little bit after the fact, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I think we have sort of made great strides in sort of getting that information and trying to disseminate it out.
There's no doubt improvements have been made, and we do have, a board secretary now who has a common calendar. Whenever we get invited to everything, it's there, so that there can be at least one Board of Ed member. But I think the incident you're referring to is there was a school that had an event that invited all sorts of public officials. Not one Board of Ed member was invited, and when the principal was asked about this, he said he had deferred to someone on his staff, and, it had totally, this procedure, administrative procedure, had been completely ignored. Now, whether that administrator was disciplined for disregarding that procedure, I do not know. But, we need to take a strict stance on this, or we will pass a policy that will make it much more difficult for everybody. And I don't think we want to go that route.
It should be codified.
Well, that's the debate.
So I just want to clarify, we don't discipline our staff for making mistakes. If something is, because we all make them every day, if something is just violated time after time, obviously, we would engage with that person in a different way. But this was simply a mistake. There was another person on the staff who was involved in organizing this event who invited the people who were invited and forgot to invite other people, or didn't invite other people. So
Stephen, can I just make a suggestion?
that will not happen again.
Could we just, things like this that Mike is referring to, I should say, some big events, is there a way, a lot of times we have parent volunteers that are orchestrating this and working really hard and volunteering their time, and I applaud them for that, but where our principals maybe oversee some of this, depending if it's a really big event? It could be a common council member, a Board of Ed member, whatever it is, but I think it's important, especially if it's school-related, that we know about it. Just a suggestion.
And I think it's important that our principals be involved in these things and
Yes,
just not
a hand in it, just
defer
knowing.
them to other people on the staff.
Okay. So that's just the first read, so
Yes.
thank you for that. Appointment. Tom, do you want to give us April 2019 monthly financial report?
You have the report in front of you. We're now 83% of the way through the fiscal year, 80% through the school year. We've spent $137.9 million, which is about 72% of our budget, and is about 2.25% greater than the expenditures at the same time last year. There's really nothing new to report here. We are expecting to end the fiscal year within budget, and as you're aware, we are seeking to end the year with a surplus of $1.9 million, which per agreement with the city, we would then request be carried forward into the new fiscal year. I have met with the new city finance director and let him know about that, budget agreement, because obviously he was not here with the city at the time that that arrangement was agreed to between the Board of Ed and the city. Again, the only things I'd point out, and I've mentioned these before, in terms of if you look at the wage accounts, they're tracking pretty much where we would expect them. Benefit accounts, again, about 75% expended, and we expect will be fully expended in those benefit accounts by year end. In our professional services accounts, you'll see in the 330 account, which is the largest account there, that's driven primarily by special education. We're 61% expended, so that's about 22% less than at the same time last year. So we are expecting some savings in that particular account. In the 400 series of accounts, the property services, we're about 68% expended, although there are a number of capital repairs and improvements that are getting underway as we approach the end of the school year, and so we expect that those accounts will be fully obligated by the end of the fiscal year. Special ed tuition, again, we've talked about this before as well. The 563 account in our 500 series, we're about 77% expended, but in the special education out-of-district tuition account, we're 68% expended, which again is running slightly under budget. It's running about a little less than 5% below our spending in the same account last year. In supplies and materials, the major accounts there include, of course, instructional supplies and other types of maintenance supplies, and our utility accounts. Electricity, we're 67% expended in electricity, about 81% in our oil, and about 89% in natural gas. Obviously, we've now pretty much reached the end of the heating season. Cooling season is now here, so we think we're on budget essentially in those accounts. And lastly, in the equipment accounts, the 700 series, this is for instructional equipment, non-instructional equipment, software, and the lease payment for the bus depot. And those accounts are all trending on budget. We're about 72% expended in total in those accounts. So I don't know if there's any questions, but nothing, terribly new to report.
Yes, Brian?
Thanks, Tom. First, looking at the substitute lines, I'm just tickled. This just keeps getting better. So I hope there's not like blue days in May and June, but we saved a lot of money there this year.
Yes, absolutely. Substitute accounts, as you're aware, we transferred. We transferred that to the daily sub expenses. Was transferred from the central office budget to the school budgets, and so that now is controlled by the schools, and they obviously have more incentive now to make sure that those expenses are held to the minimum, and I think we're seeing some of the benefit of that student-based budget approach.
And then not small, but not insignificant either. Salaried overtime, line 130, seems to be coming in a little hot. Do we know why that might be? Do we need to beef up the budget for that next year? Or?
Yeah, I need to do a little bit more research on that to understand everything behind that. I know some of it is in facilities. If you look at the facilities area, you'll see that we have in the 124 account for custodians, you'll see that we've spent 76% of the budget, and again, we're 83% of the way through the fiscal year, and we've spent about I'm sorry, I lost the account again. About 3%.
We're flying over on 130.
Right.
I mean, if it's
but I guess
from other lines.
Right. The issue is we have been not obviously, as you know, filling custodial positions as well as maintenance positions. So we're experiencing some turnback in those areas that's been partially offset by some additional overtime expenses. But that is an account that I want to look a little further at. I know that certainly part of the number, and again, we're at about 90% expended of the adjusted budget, so it's a little higher than where we would expect at this point in the fiscal year. And part of it, I know, is in the facilities area, and we will research the rest of it to see, what else may be driving that.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so we will go to committee representative reports. Why don't we start with Julie?
Sure. Thanks. So I'll quickly report on the counseling redesign committee. And so We've had a couple of additional meetings. There was a meeting on May 9th. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there. But I did hear that we have started some of the first meetings with counselors have started to happen to kind of to figure out where counselors are, where school counselors are now, getting their feedback on their understanding, philosophy on the role of school counselors, values. The focus groups are starting to be planned, and so there will be a number of focus groups that'll happen, which will include students, alumni, parents, including some feeder patterns, and that would be in both English and Spanish, as well as school leaders. And so that's kind of the next big step is making sure those focus groups happen over the next several months, and then in the fall coming back and starting to develop some actual recommendations from the results of those focus groups, as well as the CASEL model and various other approaches that we are discussing as a committee. And so we meet again on this Thursday.
Great.
Negotiations, we've reached a tentative agreement with the techs union. It's waiting for a vote from the union, but we expect that to go through. We have commenced negotiations with the ASG and nurses unions. And by next month, we have to commence negotiations with our two biggest unions, NASA and the NFT, and we're preparing for those now.
Okay, Sarah?
So there was an official meeting of the Special Education Parent Advisory Council last night, which has been renamed NSPEDPAC to differentiate it because they were CPAC and CPAC, which is very confusing for everybody. So they've renamed it, which is great. They appointed their executive board. They passed bylaws. We got a really robust update at our last SPED ad hoc committee meeting about their organizational meeting and the philosophy behind the choices that they made. And Best Buddies is sending 3 students to the National Best Buddies Leadership Conference.
Sweet. Okay, on facilities, we just had a meeting last night. The focus really was on the ed specs, which you heard all about, and we approved. There was a bit of a discussion, Brian McMahon, there's been this big study was done on the air quality and what could be done there, and we had a number of our teachers had some pretty serious illnesses. We weren't sure if it was related, so we had UConn Health come in, occupational health, and they provided a report which we've been digesting, and Bill Hodel at the meeting did lay out exactly what our plans are going to be this coming summer in terms of how we're going to change certain ventilation, cleaning of things. We have $150,000 budgeted for this, and that whole process is underway. So I think that's the biggest thing. Next Wednesday, we will have the topping off ceremony, which is kind of like a later stage groundbreaking for the Ponus Ridge project. That project is well underway, and this topping is one of the last, if not the last piece of steel that gets placed for the structure of the building, and that, as I said, will be next Wednesday. So that's, I think, probably the biggest development. That's our biggest construction project. Columbus at Ely continues to meander the way through. We're waiting to hear from the state. We still haven't heard, but we're waiting and hoping to hear from them shortly. That's about it, right?
Thanks, Mike. Finance meeting in May was canceled. There was a few transfers that you had all approved earlier on consent tonight. We did vet those, and there were some questions went back and forth from committee, and nothing earth-shattering. June, we will not have our finance meeting at the regular scheduled time because it coincides with Norwalk High graduation. Tentatively, it looks like we're going to have that meeting on June 10th. We do have to approve the budget to move forward to the full board. There's also retirement dinner that night. So, and as you know, and the new members will find out if you haven't, that like June is crazy packed. So we're going to squeeze it in and get that in there, and that's all. I expect some of the other initiatives we have going on we'll discuss at retreat, but we're going to focus probably June 10th on the budget and try to get to the retirement dinner and make all our graduations that week. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Keys?
Yep.
Policy, I think we've talked enough about policy tonight, but we will have our next policy meeting on June 4th. In regards to, and continue obviously working, I think we'll be, I don't want to say indefinitely, but until we can finish off all these CAPE recommended policies, we'll be continuing to work on that. As far as school start time committee, we had a meeting May 2nd, as well as there was just a recent one, May 16th. Looking at student surveys, really still reviewing the school alternative times, recommendations, really trying to allocate our budget. That $700,000 mark is really what we're trying to hone in on and get close to that. We also discussed having breakout groups, and we talked about different groups. We have, I believe, about 16 or 17 members to kind of delve in. I know during the last meeting, which was May 16th, rationale, change in process, recommendations, and then implementation. I know, Dr. Adamowski, I think there's going to be a full presentation to the board either in September or October, if I'm not
Yeah, so we're at the writing group stage now. We have 16 members, 4 in each of 4 groups that are writing the 4 sections of the report. They had their first writing experience. As you point out, on the 16th, we're coming back with drafts, which would be next Thursday. And then there's going to be a final meeting in June to look at a draft of a report. We'd like to schedule this for your September meeting.
Right.
And, get advanced budget approval on this. We're pleasantly surprised that we've been able to bring the cost down. Really this is one of those things that if you just keep working on it, you see other possibilities. So I think we're actually below the threshold now of the $700,000 that was in the last budget. So that's exciting. And this has been a wonderful committee of teachers and parents and others who believe very passionately in doing this. And we haven't changed our schedule for 19 years, so it's time to do it for health reasons for our adolescents.
And if I could just piggyback on what Dr. Adamowski said, I wanted to address Mr. Jernderko, and I know, Mira, you're here, and I just want to say, as far as I know Dr. Adamowski is the one that decided on, worked with people to decide who would be the best, not necessarily best fit, but really an all-inclusive committee. And there are a lot of parents. We have a 16-member committee. Parents, as I mentioned, Joanne is who's our guru of buses, so she's been fantastic. She's on. We have principals, we have teachers, again, I mentioned parents, administrators. We have Joe Matafari, who's our director, our athletic director. So, I think that we've tried to, and I know Dr. Adamowski, you could speak better than I can as far as the makeup of the committee, but really try to make it all-inclusive, especially with principal and teacher feedback, because they're there. They're in the schools every day, so I think it was important to have that particular makeup for this committee.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
I was really impressed with the stakeholder outreach, the number of focus groups we held, and the amount of changes that the committee made to reflect that data was really impressive to me. I thought it was a great example of that model. Almost what we're trying to teach our kids in STEM, of the design model. You try it, work out the flaws, work the problem, make it better, and we've gone through several iterations with a lot of feedback, and it's very impressive.
But I think I'll make the point that we went about this the wrong way, because we voted with a whole batch of stuff in the retreat that we would look into this. We never had a discussion to say, should we do this or should we not? And that's what some members of the public are really pissed off about. And it's too late now, but we should learn from that lesson, and we should not do it that way again. That's just my 2 cents. Okay, Dr. Kimmel.
The Curriculum Instruction Committee met this evening at 5:30 to 7. We once again continue to monitor the implementation of the Gifted and Talented program. We're getting regular updates on the co-teaching, various other aspects of implementation, and we're pleased. We think we've come pretty far this year. We will continue to look at it next year. We also had a fairly wide-ranging discussion of future digital literacy curriculum and how we're going to proceed. It's a big topic, and I'm talking about K-12 curriculum, embedded digital literacy, special media centers, things like that. It was an initial discussion. We're going to discuss it briefly again next next month, and there may be a small item before the board regarding something we need to, it's kind of like a packaged curriculum. It's very low cost that will enable us to do a lot next year that we didn't plan to do. We don't have to go into it today, we'll go into it next month, but it's an interesting, it's a far-ranging, it's a wide-ranging area, and it's actually kind of exciting where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. Okay, Barbara?
Norwalk Acts this month had a meeting of its social emotional work group to present the results of the behavioral study in a really lovely deep dive, which are not yet available to the public but will be shortly. They're holding a convening on June 4th at 9 a.m. at Stepping Stones if anybody wants to attend. And we'll present that, I think, in more depth. But I think the preliminary results of that survey show that in many ways Norwalk is doing better than some people perceive. Drug use is not as scary as people perceive it to be, but what was fascinating to me, two items were fascinating to me that I think we might want to take action on. One was that 17% of our 7th, 9th, and 11th graders are reading for pleasure, which means that 83% are not. And what does that mean about our turning them on to reading as a lifelong learning tool and providing them opportunities to socially reinforce it as a pleasurable pastime? So that's one thing. And then the other was really fascinating for the parents of Norwalk to consider, which is that alcohol use is apparently through social access, meaning children are getting access to alcohol in their own home or their friends' homes. They're not going out with a fake ID and buying it. So we could consider an education campaign to counteract that issue. So I hope people will join us at the convening.
Okay, and now if we could go to board member announcements. Barbara, you want to start?
Sure. I had the pleasure of being in 4 of our schools this month. I went to Fox Run to do a site visit to observe the NEST program and to discuss the transition from IPP to in-house staff, and I was very encouraged by the developments that they are doing to assist some of our most children who need the most attention. I had the pleasure to go to Wolf Pit for the Arbor Day celebration, which was delightful. They were going to have 2 apple trees, so apples for all the kids. I attended the Kendall SGC meeting just to listen to the voices in the room and understand the issues that they're facing as they try and come up with the best possible opportunities for their students and model for their community. And I'm looking forward to working with them to get to a good solution. And I did a site visit at Merrimack just to see the facility, especially noting their cafeteria setup. And I do want to announce that we have a school-wide enrichment model fair on June 4th at 6:30 at Brian McMahon High School, which will be a celebration of the school-wide enrichment model in the schools that it was piloted in. Students will be presenting their Tier 3 or Level 3 projects, which I think will be a really wonderful night. I also attended the meeting of the pedestrian committee of the Walk Commission, the Bike Walk Commission, to discuss the possibility of the city prioritizing walkability within a 1-mile radius of our elementary schools, which is a project which will be overseen by a combination of Anthony Carr and the operations department and Catherine Hebert, mobility. And I think that's a very exciting project. And I also am excited to announce that I found out from Lucy Dathan about an hour ago that the recess bill has passed the House tonight, which we thought was dead, but is now passed and likely to go to the Senate shortly. So, good news. Yep.
Bruce?
Enough.
I went to see Shrek. It was amazing. That's about it. Loved it.
It was amazing.
Wasn't it? Yep.
Okay, Brian?
Well,
all set, thanks. Okay, I did go and got pulled into working at Rowayton School Carnival, which is an event we have every year. I would say almost every year I've worked there, it has rained.
This year?
No, this year it was glorious. It was amazing. Saturday was a gorgeous day. Friday night, it rained Friday afternoon. I think it spat for about 30 seconds on Friday night. It was stunning. It was the best weather they've ever had, so that was kind of fun. I will just share with everyone, the planning commission did vote tonight, and they voted 4-3 in favor of the new school campus, but the planning commission rules now require a 5 vote for it to be approved, so it in fact was rejected. And the 3 people who voted against were Mike Lushak, Mary Peniston, and Dave Davidson, and I will just say that, you know, we've made a very, I think, persuasive case, and I am planning to publicly identify all the people who do vote against the new construction, and when we have the cost overruns and all the problems with the renovation, we can put those names right out there, because I think this is, people need to, they're making these decisions, and I think they're making the right ones, and they need to be accountable for them. Sarah?
My oldest daughter went to the Rowayton School Carnival.
Okay.
She thought it was awesome. She got rained on the thing they put you in and it spins you around.
Salt and pepper or whatever?
Salt and pepper, which I was aghast that she went on.
Yeah.
And I am continuing to do my crazy master's thesis project, and I continue to need voices from people in the community to call me or come and email me, and I will come to you and record you, and all I need you to do is say hi, and we are connected. And no one will be able to tell it's you, and it won't be scary, and you don't need to have stage fright about it. Just get in touch with me. Mr. Mayor, you are absolutely invited.
Okay, Mike?
Nothing to add.
And Julie?
Sure. So first, I want to thank the Curriculum and Instruction Committee and the staff that were at the meeting beforehand for tolerating our honorary board member of my son tonight. Impromptu potty training right at the end of the board meeting, or at the committee meeting, but that's okay. So thank you for that. I will say I try to keep my professional and my personal life and my role as a board kind of separate, since they often intertwine a little bit. But I was recently in Salt Lake City at a conference for the Council on Chief State School Officers presenting on an upcoming publication that's coming out. And I had the privilege of sitting with staff from Connecticut Department of Education, the Bureau Chief for the Talent Office, as well as the Bureau Chief for School Improvement, and had some great conversations with them, and it was really nice to talk about some of the stuff that Norwalk's doing. And I was also really excited to learn about some stuff that's coming out from the department about minority recruitment, and I know that's something that's coming up on our radar. We've talked about it in the policy committee, so I also tried to kind of make some of those connections and got some other suggestions from that bureau chief of connections that we can make in Norwalk to learn from others that are doing some really interesting, progressive things looking at minority recruitment. So that's it.
Thank you, Julie. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Today, we had the pleasure of attending the NECA graduation, and some of the students who graduated in 4 years with a high school diploma and a 2-year associate's degree, and 5 others who took 5 years to do the same. I think it's an opportunity because we have 2 graduations of our high schools coming up next month. And we've always talked about showcasing our school system and dispelling some of the myths that have existed for far too long, going back many, many, many years. There is enough data right now to show that the Norwalk Public School System is an amazing school system that provides a world-class education to our students. And I think we should have a comprehensive effort to determine how we best showcase what's happening. We talk about it. Maybe some people watch this meeting at night when they're trying to go to sleep, I don't know. But there are tremendous things happening in the city of Norwalk regarding education. And One of the things that first I noticed when I first got elected and I sat in on the graduations, and I looked at the list of colleges that our students are being accepted to. And it's absolutely mind-boggling because they're accepted to all the best colleges throughout the country. And so that's just my thought. The other thought regarding the renovate as new versus new, you know, we're talking right now about the old Columbus. And the old Columbus is not going to have any work done until the new Columbus is in place. And I think the discussion is still open regarding all of those things, how we're going to proceed, because as we get more information and we have greater numbers that we can look at and massage and try to figure out what makes sense, I understand where people are saying we should renovate as new because it's going to cost $3 million more to build a new school. I think there's those of us who are still also concerned about what we might find when we start renovating as new and the cost overruns. So I don't want to close the door on those discussions. I think they're still open. I think the more information that we get, I know the superintendent and I, and unfortunately Tom's not able to go, but my finance person and others are going to meet with the Department of Administrative Services, I believe on Thursday morning, Doctor?
Thursday morning.
Thursday morning, to have these discussions about our buildings and what the state is willing to do as far as reimbursement and how we need to proceed for the next, and I made a comment to my new CFO, we shouldn't be thinking in terms of 5 years down the road as to what we're going to do. We need to be thinking and putting money into the capital budget each and every year to upgrade and maintain our facilities, schools, other city buildings, because far too long they've been ignored. And then we find ourselves in a situation that we're in now. Okay, for the next 5 years, we need $180 million. We shouldn't be in that position. And we should also start looking at bonding for 30 years as opposed to 15, which might give us better bang for our buck. So there's a lot of discussions that still need to be had. And once we get the numbers, once we start having the discussions, I think things will become more clear as to how it's best to proceed. So just my thought.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Mr. Mayor? Okay, well, I think we have to approve the minutes for April 23rd and May 7th. I'm assuming everyone had a chance to review them. Could I have a motion to approve April 23rd? Mr. Lyons and Ms. Key seconds. Any corrections? Yes, Barbara?
Page 7, paragraph 3, could it read, Ms. Meyer Mitchell stated that a discussion had been had to implement 3 marketing touch points with parents over the course of several weeks and to provide talking points and resources for families to use to discuss the issues. And page 11, last paragraph, maintenance schedule for all buildings. I think it said a maintenance schedule for the one particular school, but it should read maintenance schedule for all buildings.
Okay, any other corrections? Yes, Sarah?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I thought I saw it, sorry. No. Okay, then the minutes are approved. Yes, Julie?
I have one or two. On page 15, under board member announcements, Ms. Corbett said that all board signatures have been secured. And first of all, I think this is related to the code of conduct. So Ms. Corbett said that all board signatures have been secured on the code of conduct. And I believe the statement that is hanging was that it would be nice if maybe all appointed and elected officials within the city would sign similarly an appropriate code of conducts, period. And then there was that's it. Oh, wait, nope. And then above that, under committee reports, it was just that there was no title for my report, and it's just that it's related to the counseling redesign committee. Also page 15.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so could I have approval for the minutes as corrected? Yes?
Just approving that, yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, everybody? Hands up, please.
Abstention.
Oh, Brian Meek is abstaining. The rest are in favor, no opponents. And then going to the minutes of May 7th, could I have a motion?
Correction.
Yes?
Mike Lyons was in attendance at that
Okay,
meeting.
we need a motion to approve first.
Sorry.
So you're making a
I'll make a
motion to
motion.
approve?
I'll second.
And Mr. Lyons will second. Corrections? Mr. Lyons was in
present at the meeting and
attendance
it's not
at the
voted.
meeting, which was not reflected. That could be corrected. Any other corrections? No? Okay, then approval to, vote to approve the minutes as corrected. All in favor? And that is it. It is now 9:25. I propose a 10-minute break before we go into executive session. And a 5-minute break.
I'll move that we go into executive session for discussion regarding employment of public officer or employee. Get that passed and then
Yes,
take.
okay, you got it. Okay, so-
I only need about 5 minutes with you in executive session,
We
so
need a second and a vote.
Yeah, so Mike proposed, second, Heidi Keys, all in favor? Unanimous.
Dr. Adamowski said we needed 5 minutes, so we don't need a 10-minute break.
Okay, no, I said 5